The Last Supper, the beginning of the sacrifice. It was the eve of Passover. Jerusalem was crowded with pilgrims, the atmosphere tense, and rumors were spreading like wildfire. Jesus of Nazareth, the one who performed miracles and spoke with authority, had arrived in the city. His words had shaken the temple. His love had healed lepers, blind people, and the possessed. But his message had also shaken the very foundations of religious power. In an upper room, lit by oil lamps and the expectant silence of his disciples, Jesus sat for the last time at the table with them. He broke the bread, blessed it, and distributed it, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Then he took the cup with wine and added, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." The disciples didn't fully understand. What did he mean by given? Why was he talking about death if he was the promised Messiah? But Jesus already knew what was coming. Betrayal, an unjust trial, pain, and the cross. His heart, both human and divine, trembled in secret. In the midst of that solemn meal, Jesus looked at Judas, his disciple, with sad eyes and said in a trembling voice, "One of you will betray me." The silence was absolute. The air grew heavy. Judas, his face hardened by doubt and deceit, left the room to fulfill the Garden of Gethsemane, the agony of love. After the supper, Jesus led his disciples out of the city to a place called Gethsemane, at the foot of the Mount of Olives. It was a peaceful garden, surrounded by ancient trees, silent witnesses to what was about to happen. "Stay here and pray with me," he told Peter, James, and John, "for my soul is very sorrowful, even to death." Jesus withdrew a little and fell to his knees. His face touched the damp earth. There, alone among the shadows, he prayed with such intensity that his sweat turned into drops of blood falling to the ground. "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. But not as I will, but as you will." It was the deepest struggle of love. Pain was drawing near, betrayal was imminent, and yet Jesus did not flee. He chose to stay. He chose suffering out of love for humanity. When he returned to his disciples, he found them asleep. Once, twice, 3 times. While he fought with fear, they fell defeated by sleep. But Jesus did not rebuke them harshly. He knew their spirit was willing, though their flesh was weak. And then, footsteps were heard, voices, torches lighting up the garden. It was Judas, leading a crowd with swords and clubs. He approached Jesus and greeted him with a kiss, the agreed sign to identify him. "With a kiss, you betray the Son of Man?" Jesus asked with a look that pierced the soul. Immediately, they arrested him as though he were a criminal. His disciples fled, and thus began the passion of the innocent. The unjust trial, silence before hate. Led like a lamb to the slaughter, Jesus was dragged by the crowd to the courtyard of the high priest Caiaphas. There, in the darkness of the night, an illegal trial began, full of lies and false witnesses. "He has blasphemed," the religious leaders shouted. "He claims to be the Son of God. What more proof do we need? He deserves to die." Jesus, calm, did not defend himself. His silence disarmed them. Only when they asked him directly, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" he answered firmly, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power, and coming with the clouds of heaven." At these words, the high priest tore his clothes in apparent outrage. They spat on him, blindfolded him, and struck him while mocking. "Prophesy, Christ, who hit you?" Meanwhile, in the palace courtyard, one of his closest followers, Peter, denied him 3 times, just as Jesus had predicted. When the rooster crowed, Peter looked at him from a distance, and Jesus, still bruised and beaten, returned a look of love. Peter wept bitterly, his soul torn. At dawn, they brought Jesus before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. Although Pilate found no fault in him, the crowd, stirred by the leaders, kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And when Pilate offered to release Jesus as was customary during Passover, the crowd chose to free a criminal named Barabbas instead of the Holy One. Washing his hands, Pilate said, "I am innocent of the blood of this righteous man." And he handed Jesus over to be scourged and crucified. The flagellation and the way to Calvary. The humiliated king. The Roman soldiers took Jesus and led him to the praetorium, where one of the cruelest and most painful scenes of the story began. The flagellation. Tied to a column, he was scourged with whips made of leather and metal. Each strike tore his skin, leaving his body bloodied and trembling. As if that weren't enough, the soldiers decided to mock him further. They put a purple cloak on him, a symbol of royalty, and a crown of thorns was forcibly woven onto his head. Then, with sarcasm and cruelty, they kneeled before him, shouting, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They struck his head with a staff, spat on him, and laughed, not realizing they were before the true King of Heaven. After all this, they forced him to carry his cross. Slowly, stumbling from blood loss and pain, he began the way to Calvary, also known as the Via Dolorosa. The crowd followed him. Some insulted him, while others wept upon seeing him in such a state. Jesus stumbled and fell several times. A man named Simon of Cyrene was compelled by the soldiers to help him carry the cross. Though Simon did not know him, that encounter would mark him forever. Among the crowd, Jesus saw his mother, Mary. Their eyes met. There were no words, but in that moment, it seemed as if the heavens themselves had stopped. The pain of a mother seeing her son disfigured by injustice was one of the most moving moments of the entire story. He also spoke to a group of women who were weeping for him. "Do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children." His body was broken, but his heart remained full of love. With each step, Jesus walked not out of obligation, but for redemption. For you, for me, for all. The crucifixion, love nailed to wood. At the top of a hill called Golgotha, meaning the place of the skull, they placed Jesus on the cross. They tore off his clothes, exposing him to shame. Then, with hammers, they nailed his hands and feet to the wood. The sound of iron piercing his flesh echoed like an eternal cry of pain. And they raised him up between heaven and earth. On his side, 2 thieves were also crucified. One mocked him, "If you are the Christ, save yourself and us." But the other, broken, rebuked him, "Do you not even fear God, being under the same condemnation? We deserve this, but he has done nothing wrong." And then, with a voice trembling from pain, he said to Jesus, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." Then Jesus, hanging and dying, gave him the most beautiful promise. "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." While the soldiers divided his clothes and cast lots, Jesus looked down and saw his mother and John, the beloved disciple. With infinite tenderness, he said, "Woman, here is your son. Son, here is your mother." Even on the cross, he thought of others. Despite the pain, despite the injustice, Jesus did not curse. He lifted his gaze to the sky and spoke a prayer that shook the universe. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Nailed to a tree, humiliated by the world, Jesus offered the purest and most sublime act of love in history. The last words, "The earth trembles, the sky weeps." The sun began to darken. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness covered the whole land. It was as if the entire universe wept seeing the Creator hanging on a cross. The air was thick, the silence mixed with the groans of the crucified. And then, with a loud voice, from the depths of his soul, Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It was the darkest moment. The Son bore the sin of the entire world. He felt the weight of all guilt, all evil. For the first time, the perfect communion with the Father was broken so that you and I could be reconciled. About to expire, with dry lips, he said, "I thirst." They offered him vinegar. And then, raising his bloodied face to the sky, he declared with power, "It is finished." Everything was done. The complete sacrifice. The debt paid. Salvation sealed. Finally, with a sigh that shook creation, Jesus exclaimed, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And he died. In that moment, the earth trembled, the rocks split, and the veil of the temple, which separated man from the presence of God, was torn in two, from top to bottom. The way to the Father had been opened. A Roman centurion, a witness to it all, fell to his knees and said in amazement, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." The sky wept, the earth trembled, and the hearts of many were broken by the love that allowed itself to be crucified. The tomb, silence between hope and pain. The lifeless body of Jesus hung from the cross. The shadows stretched longer, and Friday began to give way to the night of Saturday. The body needed to be buried before the start of the Sabbath rest. A rich and righteous man named Joseph of Arimathea, a secret disciple for fear of the Jews, courageously went before Pilate and requested the body of Jesus. Pilate, astonished by the speed of his death, granted it. With tenderness and reverence, Joseph and Nicodemus, another secret follower, took down the body. They wrapped it in a clean linen cloth with myrrh and aloes and placed it in a new tomb carved into a rock, a place that had never been used. A large stone was rolled to seal the entrance. The soldiers sealed the tomb and placed guards to ensure no one could steal the body. The religious leaders feared that his disciples might try to fake a resurrection. But those who loved Jesus were devastated. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and other women who had followed him watched from a distance where he was laid, their hearts broken. The sky was silent. The world seemed to have won. The Savior was dead. Everything was darkness. Everything was waiting. But in that silence, God continued to work. What seemed like the end was, in reality, the threshold of the greatest miracle the world would ever witness. Good Friday, the love that overcame sin. Good Friday is not simply the remembrance of a death. It is the day when the Creator of the universe allowed himself to be crucified by his creation. It is the day when love was given without conditions, without reservations, without limits. Jesus, the Son of God, did not die because he was defeated, but because he chose to give himself. Every lash, every nail, every tear, all of it was for love. It was not the hatred of the world that held him on the cross, but his unbreakable love for you, for me, for all. On the cross, Jesus took our place. He bore the sin that was not his, endured the punishment that we deserved, and opened a path of salvation for all who believe. That Friday, the sky darkened, but the light was not extinguished. A seed was sown in the earth, and though the world saw it die, God was already preparing the resurrection. For the cross was not a defeat. It was a victory disguised as tragedy. Therefore, when we remember Good Friday, we do not weep like those who have no hope. We weep for the love poured out, for the undeserved grace, and for the cross that gave us life. And while the world was silent, the sky whispered, "It is not the end. The third day is coming, and with it eternal life."